And the portion that they're running is running at lower costs and providing more service and better service.
But some folks here are in a lather over a quarter-cent increase in the tax for transportation, when this weekend the price of gas at your local station may go up a nickel or a dime. None of that is going to improve the system. It's all going to the Middle East, and it's going to the Texas oil barons.
By the way, most people here don't use the CTA, and yet they're paying sales tax increases to subsidize CTA million-dollar pension benefits.
Well, if I can respond to that, I mean,
hang on a second, Kev. Question back there.
Speaking of money, my understanding is the feds have, and our people there several years ago got $6 billion of federal money in a pile, and Illinois can't touch it because they can't come up with some sort of matching funds. Is that still true?
John, this is something that Mark Kirk and other members of Congress have been complaining about. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. $6 billion? Well, some of the stuff you're talking about is like chump change compared to that. Why can't we get our hands on at least some of the $6 billion?
The answer is a capital bill, right?
Yeah, we don't have a local match, a state match. That's what we were referring to earlier. The federal government for these projects picks up upwards of 80% of the costs. We only have to contribute, 20%. But if we don't come up with that local match, there's states, the Sun Belt states, Arizona, New Mexico, California, they're all more than willing to raise their taxes and pull that federal dollars that should come to Illinois.
Are you willing to support a 67% increase in the state income tax? That's what they want to help fund this and provide more money for other government employees. 67% increase in the state income tax, that's where they're headed. So if you are supporting a 67% income tax increase for Chicago, an RTA, then you can get some of that $6 billion.
Okay, we have another comment back here.
Obviously, there's nothing simple about the issue, but hopefully maybe this is more on the simpler, lighter side. Relevant to Metra, I live off the Southwest line, and as you mentioned, there was a doubling of service in recent times. Question I would have is the tracks are there, the rolling stock is there, but yet we don't have any kind of weekend service, and realizing the cost of the crew and the fuel and whatever, I'm just trying to get an understanding of a lot of contrast to private sector and decision-making and quickness and speed, and I realize the momentum you need for a whole new line. But something like that, what does it take for, in this case, Metra, to say, hey, one train on the weekend, two trains on the weekend? Where do you start with something like that?
Well, we're starting on one train a weekend, two trains a weekend. Let me just say on the improvements that we made on the Southwest service as well as the North Central, weekend service was never included. The issue we have is there was freight traffic on those rail lines, and significant freight traffic, and they run when we're not running. And to address their issue of moving goods and getting to environmental issues and so on, we would have to make additional capital improvements to those lines to provide that service. So the improvements we made on the Southwest and the North Central of doubling those services were significant. They were in the hundreds of millions, but did not address the weekend issue when the freights are running a huge amount of freight service on those rail lines.
Well, I think it's been another lively morning dealing with another difficult issue, but I commend all of you for coming out early and trying to tackle this. Chicago Tribune, Taxpayers United, Metra, Environmental Law and Policy Center all have websites with a lot more material dealing with this issue, and you're going to hear a lot more about it in the days and weeks and months ahead, and I would urge the people in this room to stay involved on it because all of you have raised some very significant issues, and this is clearly critical to the Illinois business agenda for the next foreseeable future. And with that, I throw it back over to Rob to begin the wrap-up of our morning.
Thank you, Dennis. And let's have a great round of applause for Dennis and the panelists. To conclude, I'd like to call on Reverend Meyer for a few reflective comments, and then we'll wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you very much, friends. That was provocative stuff. was dying to know, and I don't think we're going to have time to do it today, but I was dying to know how those of you who actually work in the transportation industry, shipping, trucking, so forth, how you look at this. If we had 10 minutes with Maureen Beal, I'd be thrilled later on, even afterwards, to hear how National Van Lines looks at the significant challenges in transportation today. And I know there are others in the room who share that kind of vocational concern. Just a couple of questions that popped for me as I tried to personalize some of this for myself in my own leadership and life. How's my attitude towards public transportation shaped by the fact that I can really afford to keep paying those gas prices and keep driving in my private car? How is that foundationally kind of the way I come at life? Because I have the freedom to do that. How often does it even cross my mind that there are individuals and families that don't have that freedom? And I'll be honest with you, not much. I just don't think I think about that very much. Given both environmental and gridlock concerns expressed here today, what, if any, is my responsibility to use public transportation and model that for my kids? Are my kids growing up with even a mental framework that would consider public transportation as a way of life? How often have I ever even taken my kids on the train, much less the bus? And do I have a responsibility there to be more proactive? Finally, I thought, we obviously, everybody's in agreement, we have to respect the pragmatic, competitive, financial concerns that govern a lot of these questions. But are there any ethical principles that ought to affect our transportation policy and practices? Do we always start with utility as the highest question or the highest value? Or personal advantage is the high. Are there any larger ethical questions that or principles that ought to govern our thinking about transportation policy and practice? And do those, even one of them, if we can identify one of those principles, would that become a stake in the ground around which we were willing to mutually sacrifice and strive? I wish I had an answer to that question, but that's what some of the things that occurred to me today. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Dan. And once again, thanks to Dennis and our panelists for sharing their perspectives on this very important issue this morning. And as a teaser,
you're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. If you have any comments or questions on our programming, please email us at illinoischannel@aol.com. Or if you have any questions about the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.